Okay, here's an outline of key points for a story about a World War II veteran, designed to last approximately 60 minutes. Each point is concise but descriptive, ready for expansion. That's what I wrote down, but now it's time to actually begin telling the story. Let's meet Mr. Robert Bob Johnson. He's a spry 98 years young, living in a small, quiet town nestled in the green hills of Vermont. His house is filled with photographs and mementos from a long and eventful life. He often sits on his porch, watching the world go by with a twinkle in his eye. Bob isn't just any elderly gentleman, he's a decorated World War II veteran with a story that deserves to be heard. Bob's story isn't just about battles and bravery, it's about the human spirit, resilience, and finding meaning in the face of unimaginable hardship. It's a story filled with incredible highs and devastating lows, moments of intense fear and surprising joy. But above all, it's a story of a young man who went to war and came back forever changed, but ultimately proud and grateful for the lessons he learned. Over the next hour, we'll delve into Bob's life, from his childhood dreams to the realities of war and his eventual return home. We'll explore the friendships he forged, the sacrifices he made, and the lasting impact the war had on his life. We'll hear about moments of incredible courage and heartbreaking loss, and we'll witness the strength of the human spirit in the face of adversity. But don't worry, it won't be all doom and gloom. There were funny moments too, moments of camaraderie that helped the soldiers get through the darkest of times. We'll hear about those as well. Bob's story is a reminder of the sacrifices made by an entire generation to protect our freedom. It's a story of hope, resilience, and the enduring power of the human spirit. So, sit back, relax, and prepare to be transported back in time as we listen to the incredible story of Mr. Robert Bob Johnson, a true American hero. Get ready to hear his story, a story of World War II. He wants you to know, it was a long time ago, but it feels like yesterday. Now that you've met Bob, let's rewind the clock. Before the war, before the uniform, before the hero, there was just a boy named Robert Johnson, growing up in a small town in Ohio during the Great Depression. Life wasn't easy back then. Bob's father worked tirelessly at the local factory, and his mother kept the home fires burning, stretching every dollar to make ends meet. They lived in a modest house with a big backyard, perfect for a young boy with a boundless imagination. Bob loved to spend his days exploring the woods behind his house, building forts, and pretending to be a brave adventurer. He had a trusty dog named Buster, a scruffy terrier mix, who was always by his side, ready for any adventure. School was, well, school. Bob wasn't the best student, but he loved history class, especially stories about soldiers and battles. He dreamed of being a pilot, soaring through the sky like an eagle. He'd spend hours building model airplanes, meticulously crafting each wing and tail. His family was close-knit. Sunday dinners were a sacred tradition, with everyone gathered around the table, sharing stories and laughter. His grandmother, a kind and wise woman, would often tell him tales of her own childhood, instilling in him a sense of history and family pride. Bob had a few close friends. They would spend their summers swimming in the local creek, playing baseball in the park, and dreaming of the future. They talked about what they wanted to be when they grew up, doctors, lawyers, and, of course, pilots. He wasn't just about adventures, though. Bob had responsibilities too. He helped his father with chores around the house and delivered newspapers in the neighborhood to earn a little pocket money. He learned the value of hard work and the importance of helping others. He loved going to the movies, especially westerns and adventure films. He'd sit in the dark theater, completely engrossed in the stories unfolding on the screen, dreaming of a life filled with excitement and adventure. He didn't know it then, but life would soon become more exciting and adventurous than he could ever have imagined. Bob was a typical American boy, full of dreams and hopes for the future. He was a dreamer, a hard worker, and a loyal friend. He loved his family, his dog, and his small-town life. But the world was about to change, and Bob's life would change with it. The clouds of war were gathering on the horizon, and soon, Bob would be called upon to leave his childhood behind and face the challenges that lay ahead. His dreams of flying would come true, but not in the way he expected. The radio crackled with news, and the headlines in the newspapers grew darker each day. War was brewing in Europe, and the United States was inching closer to getting involved. Bob and his friends would huddle around the radio, listening intently to the reports, their youthful faces etched with a mixture of concern and excitement. Then, it happened. Pearl Harbor. The news hit like a punch to the gut. The carefree days of childhood were officially over. Everything changed in an instant. The feeling in the town shifted from nervous anticipation to grim determination. Bob knew, deep down, that his life was about to take a dramatic turn. He didn't wait to be drafted. He felt a sense of duty, a responsibility to defend his country. He walked down to the recruiting office, his heart pounding in his chest, and signed up for the Army Air Corps, determined to become a pilot and take the fight to the enemy. He was barely 18 years old. His parents were worried sick, of course. His mother cried, begging him to reconsider, but his father, a veteran of World War I, understood his son's sense of duty. He clapped Bob on the shoulder and said, "You're doing the right thing, son. Just be careful." Bob remembers the day he left for basic training as if it were yesterday. He stood on the train platform, waving goodbye to his family and friends, a mix of emotions swirling inside him, fear, excitement, and a sense of purpose. He was leaving behind everything he knew and loved, but he was ready to face whatever lay ahead. He wasn't the only one. The train was filled with young men, all heading off to war, their faces a mixture of apprehension and bravado. They swapped stories, joked nervously, and tried to reassure each other that everything would be all right. As the train pulled away from the station, Bob looked out the window, watching his small town fade into the distance. He knew that he was embarking on a journey that would change him forever, a journey that would test his courage, his strength, and his spirit. He didn't know what the future held, but he was determined to do his duty and come home a hero. He felt a mix of sadness leaving his home, but also pride, ready to serve his country. He had a feeling this was just the beginning of a long journey. Basic training was a rude awakening. Gone were the comforts of home, replaced by grueling physical exercises, endless drills, and strict discipline. Bob and his fellow recruits were pushed to their limits, both physically and mentally. The goal was to transform them from ordinary young men into hardened soldiers, ready to fight for their country. The days began before dawn with reveille, a loud bugle call that shattered the silence and sent everyone scrambling out of bed. They'd start with calisthenics, push-ups, sit-ups, and endless laps around the training field, until their muscles ached and their lungs burned. After breakfast, it was time for drills. They learned how to march in formation, how to handle a rifle, and how to follow orders without question. The drill sergeants were tough and demanding, constantly yelling and pushing them to do better. They were intimidating figures, but Bob knew they were just trying to prepare them for the realities of war. There were classroom sessions too, where they learned about military tactics, map reading, and first aid. Bob found the map reading particularly challenging, but he persevered, knowing that it could save his life someday. Evenings were spent cleaning their barracks, polishing their boots, and writing letters home. Bob would write to his family every week, telling them about his experiences and reassuring them that he was doing okay. He didn't want them to worry too much, even though he knew they were. Despite the hardships, Bob found camaraderie in basic training. He and his fellow recruits formed close bonds, supporting each other through the tough times. They shared stories, jokes, and dreams of the future, forging friendships that would last a lifetime. There was Johnson from Alabama, a quiet but strong farm boy, and there was Kowalski from Chicago, always cracking jokes and keeping everyone's spirits up. One particularly memorable incident involved a mess hall mishap. Kowalski, trying to impress a pretty waitress, accidentally tripped and sent a tray full of food flying, splattering the drill sergeant with mashed potatoes and gravy. The entire mess hall erupted in laughter, despite the drill sergeant's furious glare. They all had extra duties that weekend. Bob excelled in marksmanship, his steady hand and keen eye making him a natural with a rifle. He also showed an aptitude for mechanics, quickly learning how to repair and maintain the engines of the training aircraft. His dream of becoming a pilot seemed closer than ever. Basic training was tough, but it transformed Bob from a naive young man into a disciplined soldier, ready to face the challenges of war. He learned valuable skills, forged lasting friendships, and discovered a strength he never knew he possessed. He was ready for whatever came next. He was ready to serve. After months of grueling training, the day finally arrived when Bob received his orders. He was being deployed to Europe. He was assigned to a B-17 Flying Fortress bomber crew as a ball turret gunner. It wasn't exactly the pilot's seat he had dreamed of, but he was going to fly, and he was going to fight. The ball turret was a cramped and dangerous position, located underneath the belly of the bomber. Bob would be sealed inside, with only a small window to see out, and two 50 caliber machine guns to defend the plane from enemy fighters. It was a lonely and vulnerable spot, but Bob was determined to do his job. He said goodbye to his friends at the base, promising to write and to see them again when the war was over. There were handshakes, backslaps, and a few tears. They knew that they might not all make it back. The journey to Europe was long and uncomfortable, crammed into a transport ship with hundreds of other soldiers. The seas were rough, and many of the men were seasick. Bob spent most of the time on deck, staring out at the ocean, trying to imagine what awaited him in Europe. When they finally arrived in England, Bob was struck by the sight of the war-torn landscape. The cities were scarred by bomb craters, and the people looked tired and weary. He realized that this was no longer a game, this was a real war, with real consequences. He was assigned to a base in the English countryside, where he met his bomber crew. They were a diverse group of men from all over the United States, each with their own unique skills and personalities. There was Captain Miller, the experienced and steady pilot, Sergeant Davis, the wisecracking navigator, and Corporal Rodriguez, the quiet and reliable radio operator. Bob quickly bonded with his crewmates, learning to trust and rely on them. They were a team, and their lives depended on each other. They spent hours studying maps, practicing their gunnery skills, and preparing for their first mission. The tension was palpable. Everyone knew the risks involved in flying bombing missions over enemy territory. The skies were filled with deadly flak and swarms of enemy fighters. Many bombers never made it back. Bob tried to stay focused and positive, reminding himself that he was doing his duty, fighting for freedom and democracy. He wrote to his family, telling them that he was safe and that he was proud to be serving his country. He knew that his first mission would be a test of his courage and his resolve. He was scared, but he was also determined to do his job and to protect his crewmates. He was ready to face the enemy. He was ready to fly. He was ready for war. The target for their first mission was a factory on the outskirts of Frankfurt, Germany. It was a crucial industrial site, vital to the German war effort. Bob's crew knew that the mission would be heavily defended. The morning of the mission was cold and clear. Bob and his crewmates ate a nervous breakfast, their faces pale and drawn. They went through their pre-flight checks, double-checking every piece of equipment, making sure everything was in perfect working order. As they climbed into the B-17, nicknamed Lucky Lady, Bob felt a knot of fear tighten in his stomach. He strapped himself into the ball turret, the small metal sphere feeling claustrophobic and vulnerable. He tested his guns, the cold steel reassuring in his hands. The bomber taxied down the runway, the engines roaring to life. With a surge of power, they lifted off into the sky, joining a massive formation of other B-17s, a silver armada heading towards enemy territory. As they crossed the English Channel, Bob could see the coastline of France in the distance. The sky was clear, but he knew that danger lurked ahead. The radio crackled with warnings of enemy fighters in the area. As they approached the German border, the flak started. Black bursts of anti-aircraft fire exploded around them, shaking the bomber violently. Bob could hear the shrapnel ripping through the metal skin of the plane. He gripped his guns tightly, scanning the sky for enemy fighters. He saw them then, Messerschmitts and Focke-Wulfs, darting in and out of the formation, attacking the bombers with relentless fury. The sky was filled with smoke and tracers, the air thick with the smell of burning fuel and gunpowder. Bob fired his guns, trying to protect the Lucky Lady from the attacking fighters. He saw one enemy plane go down in flames, a small victory in the midst of the chaos. The Lucky Lady took several hits, but Captain Miller managed to keep the plane steady. They reached the target and dropped their bombs, the ground below erupting in a massive explosion. But their troubles were far from over. As they turned to head back to England, they were attacked by a squadron of enemy fighters. The Lucky Lady was badly damaged, and several crew members were wounded. Bob continued to fire his guns, defending the plane with all his might. He was scared, but he was determined to keep his crewmates alive. He knew that their survival depended on him. Against all odds, they managed to fight off the enemy fighters and limp back to England. The Lucky Lady was a mess, riddled with bullet holes and barely able to fly, but they had made it. They had survived their first mission. They had seen war, and they had lived to tell the tale. Bob knew he would never be the same. The world had changed forever. The missions continued, each one more dangerous than the last. Bob flew mission after mission, his nerves frayed, his body exhausted. He saw planes go down in flames, watched his friends get wounded or killed, and faced death countless times. One mission stands out in his memory. They were targeting a heavily fortified U-boat pen on the coast of France. The flak was intense, the sky a swirling mass of black smoke and exploding shells. The Lucky Lady was hit hard, one engine knocked out, and the controls damaged. Captain Miller fought valiantly to keep the plane in the air, but it was a losing battle. They were losing altitude rapidly, and it was clear that they wouldn't make it back to England. He gave the order to bail out. Bob scrambled out of the ball turret, his heart pounding in his chest. He clipped on his parachute and jumped into the cold, empty sky. The wind roared in his ears as he plummeted towards the earth. He pulled the ripcord, and the parachute blossomed above him, slowing his descent. He looked around and saw other members of his crew floating in the sky, scattered across the landscape. He landed hard in a field, twisting his ankle. He quickly gathered his parachute and hid it in a nearby ditch. He knew that he was in enemy territory, and he had to be careful. He started walking, trying to find his way back to Allied lines. He walked for days, hiding in forests, sleeping in barns, and scavenging for food. He was exhausted, hungry, and scared, but he refused to give up. One night, he stumbled upon a small farmhouse. He knocked on the door, hoping for help. An elderly woman answered, her face etched with suspicion. Bob told her his story, and she listened intently. Despite the risks, the woman agreed to help him. She hid him in her attic, providing him with food and water. She told him that she was part of the French resistance and that she would help him get back to England. For weeks, Bob stayed hidden in the attic, waiting for his chance to escape. He learned about the resistance and their efforts to fight the German occupation. He was inspired by their courage and their determination. Finally, the day arrived when the resistance contacted him. They had arranged for him to be smuggled out of France on a fishing boat. He said goodbye to the woman who had saved his life, promising to never forget her kindness. The fishing boat took him to England, where he was reunited with his surviving crewmates. He was overjoyed to be alive, but he was also haunted by the memories of his experiences. He had seen the horrors of war firsthand, and he knew that he would never be the same. He had survived, but a part of him was still back there. Back in England, after recovering from his ordeal, Bob was assigned to a new crew and a new plane. The war was still raging, and there was still work to be done. He felt a sense of duty to continue fighting, even though he was still haunted by the memories of his previous experiences. One particular mission tested his courage like never before. They were tasked with bombing a strategic bridge in Germany, a vital supply route for the German army. The weather was terrible, with thick clouds and heavy fog obscuring the target. As they approached the bridge, the Lucky Lady 2, as they called their new plane, was hit by a barrage of flak. One of the engines caught fire, and the plane began to lose altitude. The pilot, Lieutenant Thompson, ordered the crew to prepare to bail out. But then, disaster struck. A piece of flak ripped through the cockpit, seriously wounding Lieutenant Thompson. He was slumped over the controls, unconscious. The plane was spiraling out of control. Bob knew that if someone didn't act quickly, they were all going to die. Without hesitation, he unstrapped himself from his ball turret, crawled through the narrow confines of the plane, and made his way to the cockpit. The scene was chaotic. Smoke filled the air, and the plane was shaking violently. Bob reached Lieutenant Thompson and tried to revive him, but it was no use. He was unconscious and bleeding badly. Bob knew that he had to take control of the plane. He had never flown a B-17 before, but he had watched the pilots carefully, and he knew the basics. He climbed into the pilot's seat, his hands trembling. He gripped the controls tightly and tried to level the plane. It was difficult, but he managed to regain some control. He struggled to keep the plane in the air, fighting against the wind and the damaged engine. He knew that they couldn't make it back to England, but he thought that they might be able to reach friendly territory. He radioed for help, giving their position and their situation. He flew the plane for what seemed like an eternity, his arms aching, his mind racing. Finally, he saw a small airfield in the distance. It was an Allied base. He managed to land the plane safely, bringing it to a stop just before the runway ended. The crew cheered, relieved to be alive. They had cheated death once again. Bob had saved their lives. He had acted bravely, without hesitation, putting his own life at risk to save his crewmates. He was a hero. He had flown a plane, even when he wasn't a pilot. He had saved the day. He was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross for his bravery. But for Bob, the real reward was knowing that he had saved the lives of his friends. He had proven that even in the face of death, courage and selflessness could prevail. Despite the heroism and the camaraderie, the war took a heavy toll on Bob. The constant threat of death, the relentless bombing missions, and the ever-present fear eroded his spirit. But nothing was harder than losing his friends. Johnson, the quiet farm boy from Alabama he'd met during training, was one of the first to go. He was the tail gunner on another B-17, and their plane was shot down during a mission over Berlin. Bob remembered Johnson's gentle smile and his unwavering optimism. His loss hit Bob hard, a stark reminder of the fragility of life. Then there was Kowalski, the jokester from Chicago. He was always cracking jokes and keeping everyone's spirits up, even in the darkest of times. He was Bob's bunkmate, his confidant, his friend. Kowalski was killed when a flak shell tore through the cockpit of his plane, instantly ending his life. Bob was devastated. The laughter had gone silent. The losses kept piling up. Davis, the navigator, Rodriguez, the radio operator, one by one, they fell victim to the war. Each loss chipped away at Bob's heart, leaving him feeling numb and empty. He started to question everything. What was the point of all this death and destruction? Was freedom really worth such a high price? He struggled to reconcile his belief in the cause with the reality of the war. He found himself becoming more withdrawn, less talkative. He spent hours alone, staring into the distance, lost in his thoughts. He started having nightmares, reliving the horrors he had witnessed. The grief was overwhelming. He missed his friends terribly. He missed their laughter, their camaraderie, their shared dreams. He missed the simple things, the things he had taken for granted before the war. He realized that war wasn't just about battles and strategies, it was about loss and grief, about the human cost of conflict. It was about the shattered lives and broken hearts left in its wake. He started writing poetry, trying to express his feelings, to make sense of the chaos and the pain. He wrote about his friends, about their bravery, their sacrifice, their memory. He also found solace in his faith. He prayed for his friends, for their families, for an end to the war. He prayed for strength, for courage, for the ability to carry on. The loss and grief changed him. He became more compassionate, more empathetic, more appreciative of life. He realized that every moment was precious and that every person was valuable. The war had taken so much from him, but it had also given him a new perspective on life, a deeper understanding of what truly mattered. The horrors made the good more vivid, like a photograph. He would never forget his friends. Amidst the darkness of war, there were also moments of light, moments of joy that helped Bob and his fellow soldiers keep their spirits up. These moments, however small, were like precious gems, offering a glimpse of hope and humanity in a world consumed by destruction. One such moment occurred during a Christmas Eve celebration at their base in England. The Red Cross had sent over a truckload of presents for the soldiers, and the mess hall was transformed into a festive wonderland, complete with a Christmas tree, decorations, and carols playing on the radio. Bob and his crewmates gathered around a table, exchanging gifts and sharing stories. The atmosphere was warm and convivial, a welcome respite from the harsh realities of war. They ate a special Christmas dinner, complete with turkey, stuffing, and cranberry sauce. After dinner, they decided to put on a show. Some of the soldiers sang carols, others told jokes, and a few even performed skits. Bob, who had always been a bit of a ham, recited a poem he had written about his experiences in the war. The highlight of the evening came when Kowalski, the jokester from Chicago, dressed up as Santa Claus and started handing out presents. He was hilarious, improvising jokes and making everyone laugh. It was a brief moment of pure joy, a chance to forget about the war and celebrate the holiday spirit. Another time, Bob and his crew were on leave in London. They were walking down a street when they saw a group of children playing in a park. The children were poor and ragged, but they were full of energy and laughter. Bob and his crewmates stopped to watch them play, and soon they were drawn into the game. They joined the children in a game of soccer, running and kicking the ball with youthful enthusiasm. For a brief moment, they were just kids again, free from the burdens of war. Later that day, they bought the children ice cream and candy, watching their faces light up with delight. It was a small act of kindness, but it made a big difference. It reminded them that even in the midst of war, there was still good in the world. These moments of joy, however fleeting, were essential to Bob's survival. They gave him the strength to carry on, the hope to believe in a better future, and the reminder that even in the darkest of times, there was always something to celebrate. These moments, however small, helped Bob see the good in a world filled with so much bad. They were little miracles, little reminders of the beauty of life. After months of flying missions, witnessing death, and experiencing both joy and sorrow, Bob had a turning point, a moment of profound realization that changed his perspective on the war and his role in it. It happened during a mission to bomb a German ammunition depot. As they approached the target, the Lucky Lady 2 was hit by flak, and one of the bombs was dislodged from its rack. The bomb was hanging precariously, threatening to explode at any moment. Bob knew that if the bomb detonated, it would destroy the plane and kill everyone on board. Without hesitation, he unstrapped himself from his ball turret and crawled into the bomb bay. The bomb bay was cold and dark, the air thick with the smell of fuel and explosives. Bob could see the bomb dangling from its rack, swaying back and forth with the movement of the plane. He carefully made his way towards the bomb, his heart pounding in his chest. He knew that one wrong move could be his last. He reached the bomb and examined the locking mechanism. It was damaged, but he thought he could fix it. He worked quickly and carefully, his hands trembling with fear. He managed to secure the locking mechanism, preventing the bomb from detonating. He had saved the plane and his crewmates. As he crawled back to his ball turret, Bob had a realization. He wasn't just fighting for his country, he was fighting for his crewmates, for the men who had become his brothers. He was fighting for their lives, for their families, for their future. He realized that every mission was a chance to protect them, to keep them safe, to bring them home. He wasn't just a soldier, he was a guardian, a protector, a friend. This realization changed everything for Bob. He became more focused, more determined, more committed to his role. He flew every mission with a renewed sense of purpose, knowing that he was fighting for something more than just himself. He also realized that the enemy soldiers were just like him, young men who were fighting for their country, their families, their beliefs. He didn't hate them, he pitied them. He understood that they were just pawns in a larger game, victims of a senseless war. This understanding didn't diminish his resolve to fight, but it did change his attitude towards the enemy. He no longer saw them as faceless monsters, he saw them as human beings, worthy of compassion and respect. The turning point in the bomb bay transformed Bob from a young soldier into a mature and compassionate man, a man who understood the true meaning of war and the importance of fighting for what you believe in. It was a turning point that shaped the rest of his life. He knew then what he was fighting for. He was fighting for them. As 1945 dawned, the tide of the war had clearly turned. The Allied forces were advancing on all fronts, pushing the German army back towards Berlin. The bombing missions became less frequent, and the skies seemed a little less dangerous. A sense of hope began to permeate the air. Bob and his crewmates started to talk about what they would do when the war was over. They dreamed of going home, seeing their families, and returning to their normal lives. They talked about getting married, having children, and building a better future. But there was also a sense of unease, a fear that something could still go wrong. They had seen so much death and destruction that they found it hard to believe that the war could actually end. They worried that they might not make it home, that they might become just another statistic. They also feared the transition back to civilian life. They had been soldiers for so long that they didn't know how to be anything else. They worried that they wouldn't be able to readjust, that they would be haunted by the memories of the war forever. Bob, in particular, struggled with these fears. He had seen so much death and destruction that he felt like a different person. He wondered if his family would even recognize him, if he would ever be able to feel normal again. He also worried about his friends, the ones who had survived the war. He knew that they were all scarred by their experiences, and he wondered if they would ever be able to heal. Despite these fears, Bob and his crewmates clung to the hope that the war would soon be over. They listened to the radio every day, eagerly awaiting news of the German surrender. Finally, on May 8, 1945, the news came. Germany had surrendered. The war in Europe was over. The base erupted in celebration. Soldiers cheered, danced, and fired their guns into the air. Bob and his crewmates hugged each other, tears streaming down their faces. They had made it. They had survived. But amidst the celebration, there was also a sense of sadness. They remembered their friends who had not made it, the ones who had sacrificed their lives for the cause of freedom. They knew that their victory had come at a great cost. Bob felt a mix of emotions, relief, joy, sadness, and gratitude. He was grateful to be alive, grateful to be going home, but he was also saddened by the loss of his friends and the horrors he had witnessed. He knew that the war had changed him forever, but he was determined to move on, to build a better future, and to honor the memory of those who had fallen. He was ready to go home. He was ready to start a new life. He was ready for peace. He hoped he would never have to see war again. He hoped the world would find peace. The journey home was long, but every mile brought Bob closer to the people he loved. The ship was filled with soldiers, all eager to return to their families and start their new lives. The atmosphere was electric, a mix of excitement and anticipation. As the ship approached the American coastline, Bob stood on the deck, gazing at the familiar landscape. He could see the Statue of Liberty in the distance, a symbol of hope and freedom. Tears welled up in his eyes. He was finally home. When the ship docked, Bob stepped onto American soil, his heart pounding in his chest. He scanned the crowd, searching for his family. Then, he saw them. His parents, his sister, and his dog, Buster, were all there, waiting for him. He ran towards them, and they embraced him in a warm, loving hug. It was a moment he had dreamed of for years. He was home, safe and sound. His mother cried, telling him how much they had missed him and how worried they had been. His father clapped him on the back, telling him how proud he was of him. His sister hugged him tightly, telling him how much she had looked up to him. Buster, his loyal companion, jumped up and down, licking his face and wagging his tail. It was a joyous reunion, a celebration of life and love. They drove back to their small town in Ohio, the streets lined with American flags and cheering crowds. The whole town had turned out to welcome the returning heroes. Bob was overwhelmed by the outpouring of support and gratitude. He felt like a celebrity, a hero. But he knew that he was just one of many who had served their country. When they arrived at his house, Bob was greeted by his grandmother, who had waited patiently for his return. She hugged him tightly and whispered in his ear, "Welcome home, my hero." The next few weeks were filled with celebrations, parties, and reunions. Bob spent time with his family and friends, catching up on all the news he had missed. He told them stories about his experiences in the war, but he also tried to shield them from the worst of the horrors he had witnessed. He visited the graves of his friends who had not made it home, paying his respects and honoring their memory. He promised himself that he would never forget them, that he would always remember their sacrifice. He also started to think about his future. He knew that he wanted to make a difference in the world, to use his experiences to help others. He decided to go back to school, to get an education, and to find a way to serve his community. Coming home was a dream come true for Bob. It was a chance to reconnect with his loved ones, to heal from his wounds, and to start a new chapter in his life. He was grateful for the opportunity, and he was determined to make the most of it. He was home, and he was ready to live. He was finally at peace. Adjusting to civilian life wasn't easy for Bob. He was haunted by nightmares, struggling to reconcile the horrors he had witnessed with the peaceful life he now lived. Loud noises would send him diving for cover, and he often found himself lost in thought, reliving his wartime experiences. He also struggled to connect with people who hadn't been to war. They couldn't understand what he had been through, and he found it difficult to explain. He felt like an outsider, a stranger in his own land. He knew he needed to find a purpose, something to fill the void left by the war. He enrolled at the local university, determined to get an education and make a difference in the world. College was challenging. He was older than most of the other students, and he had a hard time concentrating. He struggled with the coursework, and he often felt overwhelmed. But he persevered. He studied hard, sought help from his professors, and made friends with his classmates. He found solace in learning, in expanding his mind, and in connecting with others. He decided to study social work, inspired by his experiences in the war and his desire to help those in need. He wanted to make a positive impact on his community, to give back to the country that had given him so much. After graduating from college, Bob found a job at a local community center, working with underprivileged children and families. He helped them find housing, job training, and educational opportunities. He also became involved in veterans organizations, helping other veterans readjust to civilian life. He shared his experiences, offered support, and advocated for their needs. He found that helping others was the best way to heal his own wounds. By focusing on the needs of others, he was able to put his own struggles into perspective. He realized that he wasn't alone, that there were many others who had experienced similar challenges. He also found love. He met a woman named Mary, a kind and compassionate social worker who shared his passion for helping others. They fell in love and got married, building a life together based on love, respect, and service. Together, they raised a family, teaching their children the importance of kindness, compassion, and social justice. They instilled in them a sense of duty to serve their community and to make the world a better place. Bob's life after the war wasn't easy, but it was meaningful. He faced challenges, but he overcame them. He found purpose, love, and fulfillment. He used his experiences to help others, to make a difference in the world, and to honor the memory of those who had fallen. He built a life of peace, a life of service, a life of love. He was finally at peace. He had found happiness. He had found his way home. Looking back on his experiences in World War II, Bob has mixed emotions. He remembers the fear, the loss, and the destruction, but he also remembers the courage, the camaraderie, and the moments of joy. He says that the war taught him many valuable lessons. He learned the importance of courage, resilience, and selflessness. He learned the value of friendship, loyalty, and sacrifice. He learned the importance of fighting for what you believe in, even when the odds are stacked against you. He also learned the horrors of war, the senselessness of violence, and the importance of peace. He saw firsthand the devastating effects of conflict, the shattered lives, and the broken hearts. He says that war is never the answer, that diplomacy and understanding are always the better options. He believes that we must learn from the mistakes of the past, to prevent future conflicts. He also learned about the strength of the human spirit. He saw people endure unimaginable hardships, yet still maintain their hope, their dignity, and their compassion. He learned that even in the darkest of times, there is always light to be found, that even in the face of death, there is always hope for a better future. He says that his experiences in the war shaped him into the person he is today. They taught him the importance of gratitude, humility, and service. They taught him to appreciate every moment, to cherish every relationship, and to make the most of every opportunity. He believes that the war was a defining moment in his life, a crucible that forged his character and shaped his destiny. He wouldn't wish it on anyone, but he wouldn't trade it for anything. He says that he is proud to have served his country, to have fought for freedom and democracy. He believes that his generation made a difference in the world, that they helped to defeat tyranny and to build a better future for generations to come. He also says that he is humbled by the sacrifices of those who did not make it home, the ones who gave their lives for the cause of freedom. He believes that their memory should be honored and that their sacrifice should never be forgotten. He hopes that future generations will learn from the lessons of World War II, that they will strive for peace, justice, and understanding, and that they will never have to experience the horrors of war. He wants them to know what it was like, so they can avoid it. He wants peace to prevail. He wants love to lead. He wants a better world. He believes it's possible. Despite the hardships and the horrors he witnessed, Bob is filled with a sense of gratitude and pride when he reflects on his service in World War II. He is grateful for the opportunity to have served his country, to have fought for freedom and democracy, and to have made a difference in the world. He is proud of the courage he displayed, the sacrifices he made, and the friendships he forged. He is proud of the fact that he never gave up, that he always persevered, even when the odds were stacked against him. He is also grateful for the lessons he learned, the experiences he had, and the person he became. He believes that the war transformed him into a better man, a more compassionate man, a more grateful man. He is grateful for the love of his family, the support of his friends, and the opportunity to build a life of peace and purpose after the war. He is grateful for the simple things, the things that he had taken for granted before the war, a warm bed, a good meal, a loving embrace. He is proud of the fact that he was able to overcome his challenges, to heal his wounds, and to find happiness again. He is proud of the life he built, the family he raised, and the contributions he made to his community. He says that he wouldn't trade his experiences in the war for anything, that they made him who he is today. He believes that they gave him a unique perspective on life, a deeper appreciation for what truly matters. He is grateful for the opportunity to share his story, too. Bob wants future generations to remember the sacrifices that were made during World War II. He wants them to know that freedom isn't free, that it comes at a cost. He wants them to understand the importance of standing up for what you believe in, even when it's difficult. He wants them to know about the courage of the soldiers, the resilience of the civilians, and the unwavering spirit of the Allied forces. He wants them to remember the names of the fallen, to honor their memory, and to never forget their sacrifice. He wants them to learn from the mistakes of the past, to understand the dangers of hatred and intolerance, and to strive for peace, justice, and understanding. He wants them to know that war is never the answer, that diplomacy and dialogue are always the better options. He wants them to appreciate the freedoms they enjoy today, to cherish their democracy, and to protect their rights. He wants them to be informed citizens, engaged in their communities, and committed to making the world a better place. He wants them to know that they have a responsibility to carry on the legacy of the World War II generation, to uphold the values they fought for, and to ensure that such a tragedy never happens again. He wants them to remember the importance of unity, of working together towards a common goal, and of standing up against tyranny and oppression. He wants them to know that ordinary people can do extraordinary things when they are united by a shared purpose. He wants them to know the importance of remembering. That remembering isn't just about the past, it's about the future. Because when we forget the lessons of history, we are doomed to repeat them. He hopes that future generations will learn from the experiences of World War II and that they will create a world where peace, justice, and freedom prevail. He hopes they will live in a world where no one has to experience the horrors of war again. He wants them to strive for a better future. He wants them to remember. He wants them to learn. He wants them to love. I've lived a long life, Bob says, his voice raspy but strong, and I've seen a lot. I've seen the best of humanity, and I've seen the worst. I've experienced moments of great joy, and I've endured periods of profound sorrow. He pauses, his eyes twinkling with a mix of wisdom and sadness. But through it all, I've learned that the human spirit is resilient. We can overcome any challenge, endure any hardship, and find hope even in the darkest of times. He smiles, a warm, genuine smile that radiates from his heart. I'm proud of my service in World War II. I'm proud of the sacrifices I made, the friendships I forged, and the role I played in defending freedom and democracy. But I'm even more proud of the life I built after the war. I'm proud of my family, my career, and my contributions to my community. I'm proud of the person I became, the man who learned to love, to forgive, and to serve. He looks out the window, gazing at the peaceful Vermont landscape. I believe that every life has a purpose, that every person has something to offer the world. I believe that we all have a responsibility to make a difference, to leave the world a little better than we found it. He turns back, his eyes locking with mine. And I believe that even in the face of death, there is always hope. Hope for a better future, hope for a world where peace, justice, and freedom prevail. So, remember my story, he says, his voice filled with passion. Remember the lessons I learned, the sacrifices I made, and the values I upheld. And carry on the fight for a better world, a world where everyone can live in peace, with dignity, and with love. That's my final thought, he says, his voice barely a whisper. Live a life worthy of the sacrifices that were made for you. Live a life filled with love, compassion, and purpose. And with that, Bob smiles, a final, enduring smile that captures the essence of his remarkable life and his unwavering spirit. He is a testament to the power of the human spirit, a beacon of hope in a world that desperately needs it. His story is a reminder that even in the face of unimaginable hardship, it is possible to find meaning, to build a life of purpose, and to leave a lasting legacy of love and service. He is, and always will be, a true hero. His spirit will endure. His story is over. But his legacy lives on.